Welcome to Studio Tulsa. I'm Rich Fisher. My guest today is Kate DiCamillo, the winner of the 2007 Ann V. Zarrow Award for Young Readers Literature given by the Tulsa Library Trust. Although DiCamillo's career has been relatively short, her 7 published books have won no fewer than 6 major writing awards. Her debut novel, Because of Winn-Dixie, about a young girl whose mother has abandoned her and a remarkable dog named for the supermarket chain, was the Newbery Honor Book for 2001 and became a 2005 feature film. Her next book, The Tiger Rising, was a finalist for the National Book Award. Her following book, a fairy tale titled The Tale of Despereaux, won the Newbery Medal for Children's Literature and is slated to be an animated film out in 2009. You can meet Kate DiCamillo Friday evening at 7 o'clock when she'll receive the Zarrow Award and speak about her life and works. The following morning at 10 o'clock at the Central Library, she'll present awards to the winner of the Young People's Creative Writing Contest, and we'll hear some of the winners later in the program. Kate DiCamillo joins us today by phone. Kate DiCamillo, welcome to Studio Tulsa, and congratulations on the Zarrow Award.
I'm absolutely thrilled. Thank you.
And this has been a really interesting time over the last, the turn of the new century has been a great move for you. You've had these, 4 books, and nearly every one of them have won major awards. What do you count for that?
I can't account for it other than to say I feel like I've been unbelievably lucky.
You said you've always wanted to be a writer. Not necessarily you wanted to do writing, but you wanted to be a writer. At what point did that change where you actually were writing and becoming a writer?
Well, it changed at the point when I had a small epiphany that I was never going to be a writer unless I wrote something, which seems kind of like it would be a no-brainer, but it took me a good solid 10 years to reach that conclusion that if I wanted to be a writer, I was going to have to sit down and do the work. And so I was 30 years old when I started.
Now, when you say, I didn't want to do the work, was it you would write by fits and starts and get sort of frustrated because
Oh, no, you overestimate me. I just went around talking about how I wanted to be a writer and did nothing at all. That's the kind of person I was.
Uh-huh.
I just thought that somehow it would magically descend upon me. I think a lot of people, not that I can excuse my egregious behavior, but I think a lot of people think that if you're supposed to write, then something wonderful will happen, and the story will appear, and then you will sit down and write it word for word as it should be. And that could be true if you're the literary equivalent of Mozart, but that means that you're a genius, and you get one of those every century, and chances are it ain't you. That's what I say when I talk to kids. So if you want to do the work of making art, then you have to do the work. And be willing to have things come out wrong for a long time until you can figure out how to get them right. And so I think during that dark period of my 20s when I was going around saying that I was a writer, I was also suffering under that same illusion that if I was supposed to do it, I would somehow stumble upon the right story and it would tell itself.
And it would be easy.
Right, and it's not easy. It's hard.
So what was the impetus to actually, as so many writers say, put butt in chair, write?
That's the formula, isn't it? It was, I'd reached that point where I was just sick of hearing myself talk about it. So 1, I guess, would be self-loathing. 2 would be that I was 30 years old. Most of my friends had settled into adult professions and were living their lives, and I was still talking about what I was going to do. And so it was maybe what you would call pre-midlife crisis, where I saw clearly that I was going to have to act, or that I could very easily go on in that way for a long time, and then I would be 80 years old talking about what I wish I had done.
So you started writing. What were the first sort of things you wrote? Did you figure that your audience was going to be young adults and children?
No. I started, I think, where a lot of people start, with short stories for adults. Making the mistaken notion, again, that's all, my whole life is nothing but one mistaken notion after another, that they're short, therefore they're easier. And actually, the reverse is true. It's very hard to write a good short story. It's actually a little bit easier to write a novel. But I started there, and I spent a good long time sending those stories out to literary magazines. At the same time, I moved to Minneapolis, and I got a job in a book warehouse and I was assigned to the third floor, which was nothing but children's books. And as a reader, going around literally picking books off the shelves all day, that was my job. Title was picker. It was only a matter of time before I started reading.
Now, I could see as an adult, and especially with somebody with pretensions for writing, that I'm not going to read children's books.
Oh, absolutely, and thank you for bringing it up. I mean, I fully entered into that job as a literary snob, and I think a lot of literate adults look down on children's literature, but happily, the books were there to convince me otherwise. And so once I started reading, I just kind of fell in love with the art form and thought, I want to try something like this.
And so was Winn-Dixie the first attempt?
Actually, I attempted a picture book before that, but picture books are kind of like the equivalent of short stories. Everybody has that perception that they're short and therefore easier. And it's just a joke. They're the hardest thing of all to do. They're as hard as poetry.
Well, a sentence has to convey an awful lot.
Absolutely, and no word can be wasted. You have no room to take one. There's a lot of room for mistakes in novels. You can wander off and wander back, and you can't do that with a picture book because you lose your audience, and it's very difficult art form. I really admire people who do it well. I'm not one of those. But the picture book managed to get me in the door at Candlewick. They never published it, but in the meantime, I had started working on Winn-Dixie. And I said, I've got a novel. Would you read it? And they did.
So it was submitted for publication. Your first attempt? I mean, on your first publisher?
That book has had a charmed existence from the get-go that is inexplicable to me. I can only say that it kind of acts very much like a dog itself, and just kind of gets into places in people's hearts that you wouldn't expect it to. It's just a friendly, tail-wagging kind of book, I guess.
Winn-Dixie is a dog who is named because he's spotted in front of a Winn-Dixie.
Y'all don't have those in Oklahoma, do you?
We don't have Winn-Dixies here, but that's a staple of the South, is it not?
Yes, it is.
It's the supermarket. And Winn-Dixie is just an amazing dog.
I have to agree with that. That has nothing to do with me. The dog is what he is, and he is a fabulous dog. He was kind of my idea of the quintessential dog.
And Opal, the young girl that adopts Winn-Dixie and gives the dog a home, is a young girl. She's lost her parent. Her mother has ran off, and she refers to, I believe, her father as the preacher.
Correct.
What was the inspiration for writing that sort of story about a child losing a parent? And what a wonderful child this Opal is.
She is. She's I learned a lot by spending time with her. People will always think, because that book is told in the first person, that I am Opal, and I always have to disabuse them of that notion because she's a much better person than I am. Smarter, kinder, wiser. She's a wonderful kid. And as far as where it came from, and I can only say this in retrospect, stories to me are always kind of a mystery, but looking back, I wrote that book during the worst winter on record in Minnesota, and I grew up in Florida and had only recently moved to Minnesota, so it was a shock to me, to say the least. And I was homesick for the South, and that's where the book takes place. It was a way of making myself go home I couldn't literally go, I couldn't afford to go. And then it was also one of the first times in my life that I'd been without a dog for an extended period. Mm-hmm. So I made a dog up.
Did the dog come first, or did Opal?
Opal came first. Opal came first because I literally heard her voice with the sentence that I started the book with that ultimately didn't make it in there, which was, I have a dog named Winn-Dixie. That's the sentence I heard her say. And this delightful southern accented voice that I didn't hear anymore because I was here in Minnesota.
And that book, because of Winn-Dixie, has been adapted into a film a couple of years ago, but it was your first book, and it becomes a Newbery Honor book.
Yeah.
Wow.
You say that, and I got a little like, oh my gosh, how did that happen? Kind of ran through me. The thing was that I worked in that book warehouse, and it was good for me because I had a very clear kind of expectation of what would happen to me as a writer, that maybe at some point I would make enough money from it that I could go down to 20 hours a week and still keep the benefits from the book warehouse. And, I mean, that was the big pie-in-the-sky dream. And so I was dreaming very realistically, and then what happened to me was outside of anything that I could have ever conceived of. The Newbery Honor, the movie, but more than anything, this whole spectrum of people, from kids to people in their 80s who responded to that story with their hearts, and that's just like the biggest gift in the world.
Yeah. You said you had very realistic dreams of maybe, dropping down to part-time work so you could write more. But I think this is like winning the lottery moment. How much did it change your life? The fact that this book was very successful. It's probably taught in classrooms all around the country. It wins one of the highest awards in young people's literature. Was it utterly life-changing?
I remember the morning that they made the Newbery announcements. The Newbery committee called, and then local press started calling for interviews, and the book reviewer from the St. Paul Pioneer Press said, "Are you going to buy a house? Are you going to quit your job?" And I just laughed, because I was due in at the bookstore at 1 o'clock that afternoon, and I thought she was, and I've said this to her since, and I said, "Marianne, that's just, no, none of that's going to happen." But all of that happened. I quit the job.
I can't believe you went into work.
Pardon?
I can't believe you went into work.
Well, I wasn't much good. I just walked around with an idiot grin on my face, but I was there. Because the weird thing was, it still astounds me, because I knew as a kid to look for that medal on a book. I knew it guaranteed that I was going to like the book. And so to think that it would be on something that I wrote, even now, still astounds me,
Was that something you did while you were at the book warehouse, sort of look for that medal when you were reading these children's books, or was it just anything that caught your fancy?
I just voraciously made my way. That was like an education that I got paid for, because I just made my way through the whole warehouse. I read without any kind of discretion at all. I just, it came in and I read it. And so I read the award-winning stuff, and a lot of it that had happened since I was a kid. I went back and read stuff that I remembered reading as a kid, and I just read. I remember when Harry Potter came in to the warehouse, and typically when a hardcover middle grade novel came in, we serviced the whole upper Midwest. We would get 12 copies. When Harry Potter came into the warehouse, I remember we were all standing in a circle around this pallet that was stocked with boxes of Harry Potter books, the first Harry Potter book, and I remember we were all just kind of thinking that the book buyer had lost his mind. It's just like, why in the world would you order 40 copies of a middle grade novel for kids? We'll never sell it. We're going to have to return all of this. And that was that phenomenon. That was just the beginning of it. And boy, did we eat our words there.
Well, I didn't really want to talk about the Harry Potter phenomenon, but I think hasn't it given people a new appreciation for the literature that is a part of a lot of young adult novels?
Oh, no doubt. It's I think it's done nothing but benefit everybody who writes for kids. That's my take on it. Because one, it's just, at the very least, it's garnered us respect, because those books make money, and so then they, but in any number of ways, from kids reading to new respect just for people who write for kids, to adults who will now pick up a kid's book and read it. Yeah, I think it's been a wonderful thing.
I think great stories are a great story. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're using big words, little words, adult themes, or not so adult themes. A great story is a great story.
I wish we could get more people to adopt that line of thinking. But like you brought up earlier, I went into that job at the book warehouse with every prejudice about children's literature firmly in place. So,
our guest today is Kate DiCamillo. She's the author of Because of Winn-Dixie, The Tiger Rising, The Tale of Despereaux, and several books in a Mercy Watson's series, among other books. And she is the winner of this year's Ann Zarrow Award for Young Readers Literature from the Tulsa City County Library Trust. And she's our guest today on Studio Tulsa. You wrote another book called The Tiger Rising, which was a finalist for the National Book Award, which was based, I guess, on a character from a short story that you end up writing a novel about. Then you turn your attention to a fairy tale. A friend's son asked you to write a story about an unlikely hero with exceptionally large ears. That was the order.
Yep, that was the order. I said he was barking up the wrong tree. I said, I can't tell stories to order like that, Luke.
But you did.
I did, yeah.
The Tale of Despereaux, which is a wonderful fairy tale. Was it daunting going into the fairy tale realm?
It was daunting in every respect because Winn-Dixie had done so well and people loved it so much that I felt like I needed to continue to write something like that so that that people would continue to like me. And that's no way to write a book. And so I kept on having all these terrible false starts and kept on failing. And then Luke asked me that question, and I thought, what if I just throw aside all this other stuff and go in a totally different direction because I'm failing in telling, a Southern story here? What if I just strike out in a whole new way?
The two earlier books were contemporary Southern stories.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I love the South, and I would like to go back to that at some point, but I think that I was putting such huge expectations on myself that this is kind of the way to just gird around them psychologically.
Mm-hmm. So you start with a mouse and a princess and just let your imagination roam? I mean, are there any sort of fairy tale rules that you're expected to follow? I mean, most fairy tales have a moral of some sort.
Yeah, I wasn't conscious of all of that. I knew, and I'm not... I don't know a whole lot about fantasy. I just knew that whatever the rules were within your little world, you had to be consistent with them. So I had that in mind. And it was a very laborious process for me. Winn-Dixie kind of wrote itself in a way, even though I did a huge amount of rewriting and lots of drafts. This Despereaux had a plot, and it was a relatively complicated one. And so there's a wonderful collection here in Minnesota called the Curlin Collection where you can go in and look at the rough drafts that writers have done. It's all children's books. And you can see how hard I worked that book. And you would have said to me, you should have given up a long time ago. Those drafts are so agonizing. But ultimately, the mouse carried me through.
Hmm. And, of course, it won the Newbery Medal. Wow. What a great... I mean, just about every one of your books have won some major prize. I think you're on a great roll. Then in the last couple of years, you've been doing a series because most of your books earlier were one standalone book and move on. But you've attached yourself to this pig named Mercy Watson.
Yeah, she's insufferable. I love her. The great thing about Mercy, and I finished the last one. I had envisioned doing 6 when I started. Actually, I started with the idea of 3, and then I thought, I'm having so much fun, I'll do 6, but I'll stop at 6. But when I finished that 6th one, I thought, man, I wish I could go on because she's always. They're books where nobody ever learns anything, and it's delightful because everybody always remains themselves. So all you have to do is come up with an idea and put the characters there, and then you just follow them. Because they're so utterly themselves. So the story just tells itself once you come up with a situation, and they always make me laugh. So I've had a fun time with this.
Is young readers your audience at this point, or do you long to write something for a more mature audience at all?
I long to tell stories, and I'm kind of that whole distinction. I think more and more I think of myself, I guess, as a storyteller, and I don't think about audience as much as just telling the story. And I also, at the same time, I do think I'm just so lucky to be able to do this for a living, and I'll never stop writing for kids. But in the back of my mind, I always think I'm just a storyteller.
When you're talking to aspiring writers, I know you're fond of telling a story about one of your first attempts at writing, taking a class. You were asked to write about something, and your teacher came back and looked at your essay, and I really think it really does describe one of your gifts as a writer, and that's the ability to see. Can you tell us that story?
talking about the thing with Trey Greer that's on my website.
Yeah.
This is, it was a expository writing class, and yes, we were just supposed to write an essay about something. He didn't say what. And he read my essay aloud in class. I wrote about somebody that I saw outside of a Winn-Dixie and described her. And I was, of course, thrilled that he read my essay, because by that point I had hatched the terrible notion that I wanted to become a writer. And so when he read it, I thought, oh, super duper, it's all about me. And when he finished reading it out loud, he asked the class, why is this good? And then went on to say, it's not that the writing is that extraordinary. And, I sank lower and lower in my seat as he talked. But it was a pivotal moment for me as a human being and as a writer. What he cared about, what mattered most to him, was that I had taken the time to see somebody else. And
see
really
somebody that somebody would ignore for the most part.
Right, at somebody that most people would walk past. And that's, I've always kept that in the back of my mind ever since, and that's your duty as a storyteller, is to look at and listen to things that people normally walk past. It's a good idea, a good way to be a better human being, too, but it's also a great way to be a good writer, is to listen and to look.
I know that you're asked a lot about what it takes to be a writer. What are some of the other things, very quickly, that you think are important for a writer?
Reading. It's astonishing to me when I go to parties and talk to adults who are going to write a book someday, and I ask them what they like to read, and they get kind of a blank look on their face. If you want to write, the most important thing you can do is read, and read as much as you can. And then the other thing, obviously, touching on our earlier conversation, is you're going to have to write at some point if you want to be a writer. And for everybody, the pattern that works for you is going to be different. For me, it was, thinking, okay, I'm going to do 2 pages a day, but finding some way to hold yourself to it, making a deal with yourself to do a little bit of work every day. And then that listening and looking and paying attention to the world around you. And then I always say to the kids, and I think that this prejudice is still kind of dominant. Most parents are going to be worried if you say you want to be a writer. They'll tell you to get a real job, and they won't discourage you from being a writer, but they'll say, well, you can be a lawyer and write on the side. And there's going to come a time when you're going to have to stand up for yourself and believe in yourself and say that you want to do it, and in spite of it not being the most money-making career in the world, or the safest.
Well, it certainly has paid off for you and paid off for your readers as well, with some wonderful books. Congratulations on the Zarrow Award. And Kate, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Writer Kate DiCamillo speaking with us here on Studio Tulsa. She's the winner of the Tulsa Libraries Trust 2007 Ann V. Zarrow Award for Young Readers Literature. She'll receive the award tomorrow night at 7 o'clock at the Central Library. The following morning, she'll be giving out the 2007 Young People's Creative Writing Contest Awards and also talking about her work. Her most recent book is Mercy Watson Fights Crime. As I mentioned, Kate DiCamillo will be giving out the winners of the Tulsa City County Library's Young People's Creative Writing Contest. Today we feature 2 of the winners. First, a poet, Taylor Parks, a 6th grader at L'Aurore Christian Academy, reading her poem, A Villain's Poem.
I'm going to get rid of that pesky hero. He's going to be toast, and not the good kind, the burnt kind without any butter, the burnt kind without any jam. I'll use my psychopathic powers to control him. I am. I'm going to get rid of that hero with his purple-yellow spandex. I might suck him in a vortex. I might soak him with some Windex to shrink his little cape. I might dip him in some Carmex. I might push him on some hardtacks. I might stick his shoes in hot wax so he won't escape. I'm going to get rid of that pesky hero. He's going to get out of my way with his I'll save the world here and his never fear there. I'll make him pay, I pray. I'm going To get rid of that pesky hero, I'll roll him down a big hill until he begins to totter. I'll dry his mouth with cotton and then make him drink tap water. Make him shave his Uncle Lester, put him in some polyester. Yes, I will, because I'm the, bester. Goodbye, goodbye to that pesky hero.
Taylor Parks reading her poem, A Villain's Poem. She's a sixth grader at Laurel Christian Academy, and she was one of the winners of the 2007 Young People's Creative Writing Contest, this year sponsored by the Tulsa City County Library. We finished with another winner, an essayist. It's a This I Believe essay. It's written by Daphne Desjardins, a freshman at Holland Hall.
Seeing a family member suffer is one of the worst experiences in the world. Whether they have lost a loved one, broken a bone, or just stressed, showing you care is important. This feeling is the same if your family member or friend had just done something amazing or you just love them. It seems like you need to say something, but you don't know what, so you reach over and give them a hug. I believe in the power of a hug. I have 2 younger brothers who are 5 and 7 years old. Every night before they go to bed, they must have a hug from my parents before they can sleep. When I babysit, the famous words always come from their mouths right before I turn off the lights. Ask Mom and Dad to give us a hug and a kiss goodnight when they come home. These hugs are very important to my brothers. They don't want hugs because they are upset or scared. They want them so they know that my parents care about them. Growing up, just to have my mom or dad put their arms around me in a bear hug was the best feeling in the world and still is today. I guess the saying, actions speak louder than words, shines through in this situation. A hug can also be used in a time of sadness. Last year, my great aunt died, and when my younger sister and I found out, we were both really upset. We didn't have anything to say to each other. We stood there looking at each other for about a minute or two until we realized what we needed was each other. Holding my sister in my arms and her gripping me tight was a strong, loving moment. All of our sadness was transported into this hug. Nothing had to be said. Just knowing someone was there was good enough. Hugging is a common thing for me. My friends and I are always hugging each other. Before our last field hockey game, our team came together for a hug. As we went through the game, I was thinking, I can trust these girls. They are my teammates. We can do this. When I see my friends going through a tough time, I hug them to make them feel better. When I see my family, I hug them because I love them. When I think back to reasons why I like being hugged, it all comes down to the feeling that someone cares about you, that they are there for you, and that they love you. Hugs have gotten my friends, family, and me through some happy and sad times. Feeling cared about is something everyone needs to experience. My favorite book, Someone Like You, by Sarah Dessen, begins with a prologue. So I reached over and pulled her to me, wrapping my arms around her and held my best friend close, returning so many favors all at once.
Daphne Desjardins reading her essay, This I Believe. She's a freshman at Holland Hall and one of the winners of the Tulsa City County Library's Young People's Creative Writing Contest. She and the other award winners will receive their award from the Zarrow Award winner for this year, author Kate DiCamillo. That event takes place Saturday morning at 10 a.m. DiCamillo will be speaking. DiCamillo will receive her award the previous evening, Friday, at 7 o'clock, again at Central Library, and the events are free and open to the public.